Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribe and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. When somebody saved their cruelty for a public table, pay attention. That is not honesty. That is theater. In this story, the lesson is simple and expensive. The moment a partner starts performing your humiliation for an audience, do not argue for your place. End the performance. Protect your paperwork, and let their choices speak louder than your pain. My wife said it over broiled salmon and mashed sweet potatoes, in a private room at a seafood place near the harbor where the windows fog from the kitchen heat, and everybody's water glasses sweated onto white linen. "I will forget you in a week," Camille said, clear as a church bell. "I already found someone better." She did not whisper it to me. She set it down for the whole table, like a centerpiece. Her mother froze with her fork halfway up. Her younger sister looked at me, then at Camille, then down at her lap. I felt the room tighten around my throat. Camille had always known how to use timing. She waited until the server stepped out and the birthday cake candles had been cleared. She waited until all eyes were available. Then she leaned back in her chair in that smooth, polished way she had, one wrist resting near her wine glass, and said, "I am tired of building my life around a man who still comes home smelling like drywall dust." There were 8 of us at that table. Her uncle coughed into his napkin. Her cousin Brent muttered, "Damn," under his breath. Nobody saved me. Nobody stopped her. If you enjoy intense cheating wife revenge stories, relationship drama, and real consequence-driven storytelling, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, when Camille said she would forget him in a week, would you have walked out as calmly as Isaiah did? I looked at my wife of 6 years and noticed something strange. My heart did not crack in the way people describe. It went still, still enough for me to hear the ice machine beyond the wall. Still enough for me to notice a smear of lipstick on the rim of her glass, darker than the shade she usually wore to family dinners. Still enough for me to see she had rehearsed this. She wanted a scene, maybe tears, maybe pleading, maybe my voice lifting so she could point and say, "See, this is what I have endured." I gave her none of it. I slid my chair back without scraping the floor. I took off my wedding band and set it beside the butter plate. Then I said, "Then this marriage ends tonight." My voice came out even, the way it does when I am tracing a fall through old wiring, and I know the break is inside the wall. Camille blinked. That was the first crack in her face. Not grief, not regret, just surprise that I had not begged. "Isaiah, do not be dramatic," she said. I stood up anyway, nodded once to her mother, and walked out. The harbor wind hit hard that night, carrying cold off the water and the smell of diesel and rain. I stood on the sidewalk beside my truck and let the city noise gather around me. Somewhere down the block, a bus groaned at the curb. A couple laughed too loud outside a hotel entrance. My phone buzzed in my pocket twice, then 3 times. I did not check it. I watched my breath lift in the dark and thought, so this is what the truth sounds like when it finally stops dressing itself up. Not loud, clean. I should tell you how I got there, because men do not usually lose a marriage in one sentence. It starts smaller than that. It starts in rooms where you excuse what should have stopped you. I met Camille at a church fundraising gala in Baltimore during a summer storm that knocked the lights out 3 times in 20 minutes. I had been hired to inspect the old fellowship hall because the breakers kept tripping whenever the caterer plugged in the warming trays. She was standing in the dark with a clipboard and a pen light, calm while everybody else panicked. "Can you save this night?" she asked me when the room lit again. She was wearing a cobalt dress and flat shoes because she was practical when it mattered, at least then. I remember that detail because it felt honest. Camille Whitfield did development work for a downtown arts nonprofit, and she spoke in complete sentences even when she was irritated. No filler, no fuss. She looked people in the eye. She had a way of listening that made you think your words had landed somewhere safe. I fixed the overloaded circuit in 14 minutes. She brought me a plate before I left. We talked in the church kitchen while volunteers boxed up leftover peach cobbler. She asked about my company, called her electric, and I told her it was me, 1 van, 2 apprentices, and more confidence than cash. She laughed at that, and it did not sound cruel. I asked what she actually did at the nonprofit besides wear a headset and rescue expensive events from disaster. She said, I make rich people feel noble enough to write checks. That made me laugh harder than it should have. It felt good to meet somebody sharp who was not trying to prove it every second. Our first date was at a carryout with bulletproof glass and the best lemon pepper wings in East Baltimore. Camille looked around at the linoleum floor and handwritten menu board, then looked back at me and said, You had better not be testing me. I told her I was feeding her. That was all. She smiled and ordered half and half iced tea like she knew the place. Afterward, we walked 3 blocks through warm August air while somebody on a porch played Old Anita Baker through a crackling speaker. She slipped her hand into mine like it belonged there. For a while, loving Camille felt like stepping into a brighter room. I had spent most of my 30s buried in work after my mother died. She had been a school secretary with neat handwriting, and a laugh you could hear from the front porch. After the funeral, I kept my grief folded up and stored it in useful places. I bought the row house she had left me in Northwood and fixed it room by room. I worked. I taught a free Saturday class for neighborhood boys and men at New Hope Baptist on how to read a panel and strip wire safely. I did not date much. Camille changed that rhythm. She brought fiddle-leaf plants into the house and linen napkins, and a way of standing in the kitchen that made the room seem staged for a magazine spread. She said my house had bones. She said my hands made her feel safe. She liked that I could repair things without calling 3 people and waiting a week. She said steadiness was rare. I believed her because I wanted to. Loneliness does not always make a person foolish. Sometimes it just makes good attention feel holy. That is almost worse, because you defend it long after it turns. We married in October under a canopy of rented lights in the courtyard of a small museum. The day was cool and bright, leaves scraping along the brick like little paper prayers. My best friend Leon, who cuts hair on Harford Road and knows every family secret in a 3-mile radius, stood beside me in a charcoal suit and whispered, Breathe. Camille wore ivory, simple lines. No fuss. In those pictures, we look solid. We look like 2 people with matching ideas about life. When I see them now, I notice the way she angled herself toward the camera, not toward me. The first year was good enough that I still grieve it, which is a hard thing to explain. There was no affair then, at least none that I knew of. There were Saturday mornings with coffee and jazz low on the speaker. There were grocery lists on the fridge and arguments about paint colors and whether my red recipe tin was for recipes or for the random screws, receipts, and spare keys I kept stuffing into it. Camille started a side venture called Slate and Cedar, invitation-only dinner events in borrowed spaces. I built her brass light fixtures from salvage parts. She cried when she saw them. The trouble began as a tone before it became a problem. Camille started saying words like elevated and aspirational more often than actual nouns. A restaurant was not a restaurant. It was a concept. A dinner was not a dinner. It was an experience. My work boots by the back door were not boots. They were clutter. She did not ask me to change all at once. She just flinched at pieces of me and called it refinement. Isaiah, do you have to wear your company's shirt everywhere? She asked once before a donor event. It is just dinner. I changed shirts. That was my first surrender. Small enough to excuse. I told myself marriage required adjustment. I told myself she moved through different rooms than I did, and maybe I should learn those rooms instead of standing on pride. But there is a difference between adapting and erasing yourself. Camille never learned that difference because too many people rewarded her every time she polished the truth into something shinier. Her mother, Denise, praised presentation like it was moral character. People only know what you show them, she said one Christmas while straightening the ribbon on a gift bag nobody had touched. My second surrender was financial. Slade and Cedar had momentum, and Camille wanted to lease an old storefront for pop-up dinners and private events. She said it would only be for a year. She said my credit would help secure the deposit and lower the insurance cost. She said she would handle everything else. I asked 3 times for projected numbers. She sighed all 3 times, then made a spreadsheet that looked expensive and felt thin. I knew it. I signed anyway. I told myself I was investing in my wife's ambition. I did not say out loud that I was also investing in peace at home. There are details that seem innocent until memory rearranges them. Camille started coming home later from cultivation dinners. She changed the password on her phone after years of not caring. She bought a perfume that smelled smoky and sweet, and too grown to wear to the office. She started setting her phone face down on the table. When I asked how an event went, she no longer told stories. She gave summaries. Fine. Good crowd. Some strong leads. It sounded like press release language. The woman who once mocked donor jargon had started living inside it. The first hard clue was a parking receipt. It fell out of her tote onto the floor in our bedroom while she was in the shower. A garage in Columbia. Wednesday night. 7 hours. She had told me she was at a board dinner downtown, 10 minutes from her office. I stood there with the receipt in my hand, steam sliding under the bathroom door, and felt that old instinct rise in me, the one that wants a demand an answer before the lie is time to put on shoes. I could have knocked then. I could have held it up and started a war. I did not. I did not because my father handled hurt like a hammer. He was not a cruel man, but when something snapped inside him, everybody nearby felt it. I had spent my whole adult life refusing that inheritance. I told myself I would not accuse until I understood exactly what I was accusing. That was decision number 1, and I still believe it saved me. Not the marriage. That was already failing. It saved me from becoming easy to discredit. Camille was brilliant under pressure. She could take a weak fact and make it look hysterical. Paper was stronger than anger, so I chose paper. I started noticing with purpose. I printed bank statements. I matched her reimbursements against our joint account. I flagged cash withdrawals she never mentioned. I looked at the lease for Slate and Cedar and saw my name listed as guarantor on more pages than I remembered. I checked our shared calendar against toll charges. The story formed slowly, then all at once. Hotel charges on nights she claimed to be with donors. Car service receipts to a boutique hotel near the harbor. Dinner tabs for 2 at places we had talked about trying together, but never did because, according to Camille, the timing was never right. The man's name arrived through repetition. Donovan Price. He was a fundraising consultant, married, polished, famous in a small local way for telling nonprofits how to court wealth without looking needy. Camille started dropping his name in conversation. Before she knew, I knew it mattered. Donovan says younger donors want intimacy, not ballroom stiffness. Donovan thinks Slate and Cedar could scale if I stopped treating it like a passion project. His opinions entered my house before he did. That irritated me more than I admitted. It was like hearing another man's shoes on your stairs when you are still standing there barefoot. I made another decision at the point where some men call cousins, and some men start checking locations, and some men blow up their own lives to get ahead of being embarrassed. I booked a consultation with a divorce attorney in Towson and took a manila folder full of documents. Her name was Monique Ellis. Silver frames, calm voice, no wasted words. She listened without interrupting, then said, "I am not here to inflame this. I am here to protect your home, your business, and your future. Can you stay quiet long enough to do that?" I said yes. She nodded once and started a list. "Separate your business accounts now." Monique said, "Document every marital expense you cover. Change nothing that looks retaliatory. Do not lock her out. Do not publish anything. Do not confide in people who like gossip more than truth." That was difficult because Leon knew something was wrong after one look at me in his barbershop chair. "Your face is too calm," he said while he edged at my beard. I told him only that Camille and I were having serious problems. He clicked his clippers off and looked at me in the mirror. Serious as in counseling or serious as in lawyer? I looked down. He understood. We did try counseling, which I include because people love to ask whether you fought for it. We sat on a gray couch in an office that smelled like lavender oil and heard ourselves explained back to us by a woman named Dr. Carr. I said I felt dismissed, managed, and financially overextended. Camille cried on cue, and said I resented her growth. She said my silence felt punishing. She said I did not celebrate her enough. All of that had pieces of truth in it, which is how manipulation survives. Dr. Carr asked us to name needs. Camille named admiration. I named honesty. Only one of those threatened her. The counseling did not fail in the way movies show. Nobody stormed out. We simply kept leaving with the same problem wrapped in softer language. Camille would hold my hand in the parking lot and say, "We are getting somewhere." Then she would go back to lying by omission before the week was out. Once, at 1 a.m, I heard her laugh in the kitchen while texting. A quiet, private laugh she had not given me in months. I stood in the hallway and felt humiliation before I felt anger. That is the part people skip. Betrayal makes you feel small before it makes you feel sharp. I found the proof 6 weeks before the restaurant. Camille had left her laptop open on the dining table while she ran upstairs to change. A hotel confirmation glowed on the screen, not hidden, just careless. Reservation for 2. Weekend package. Name, D. Price. I did not touch the keyboard. I took pictures with my phone. Then I sat down at the table we had bought together and looked at the fruit bowl, the mail, the plant by the window, all the normal evidence of a marriage, and felt something settle in me. The marriage I was protecting no longer existed. Only the logistics remained. That night, I could have confronted her. I could have said Donovan's name and watched whatever version of innocence she invented. Instead, I put the photos in my folder and waited. That was not cowardice. It was strategy. Monique had already drafted the first separation documents and advised at the time everything around the mortgage cycle, the business payroll, and the lease on Slate and Cedar. "Do not let heartbreak make you sloppy," she said. "Sloppy is expensive." So I kept paying what needed paying, moved money out of our joint savings into an account requiring 2 signatures to touch, and waited for the moment truth would reveal itself publicly. It did at Denise Whitfield's 62nd birthday dinner. Camille chose the venue, the guest list, the private room, even the cake. Looking back, she was arranging not a celebration but a stage. She wore a cream suit and gold earrings that brushed her neck when she turned. Donovan was not there, of course. Men like that rarely attend a demolition. They just hand over the match and wait in another neighborhood. Camille smiled through appetizers, touched my wrist twice for effect, then sharpened when coffee arrived. I remember thinking the room felt overly warm. I loosened my collar. Then she started. "I have spent years trying to make this work," she said, eyes glossy but not from tears. "I have dimmed myself in this marriage." That was when I knew she had practiced. Nobody naturally says dim myself with a straight face over dessert. She spoke about compatibility, ambition, and emotional loneliness as if she were on a panel. Then she turned to me and said, "I have already found someone who understands the kind of life I am supposed to have." Her sister, Yvette, whispered, "Camille," in warning. Camille ignored her. "I will forget you in a week," she said. "You have been a pause, not a partner." My reaction disappointed her more than any shout ever could. I stood, removed my ring, and ended it. No speech, no curse, no negotiation. Then I paid my half of the check at the host's stand, even though I had been invited, because I did not want a single future sentence to include the words, "after everything her family did for you." In the truck, I finally checked my phone. 8 messages before I started the engine. 2 from Camille, 1 from Denise, 3 from Yvette, 1 from Leon, 1 from Monique, because Leon had apparently called her office instead of sleeping like a normal man. I went home and slept in the workshop behind the row house, where I kept ladders, conduit, and the brass scraps from Camille's fixtures. When she came in after midnight, heels hitting the kitchen tile, she found me awake on the folding cot. "So that is it?" she asked from the doorway. "You're just done?" I sat up and said, "You announced the end of our marriage to an audience. I am respecting your clarity." She stared at me like I had spoken another language. "Do not make me the villain because I finally told the truth," she said. I almost laughed. Morning made everything practical. I emailed Monique before 6. By 10, Camille had been served with a proposed separation agreement and noticed that any new debt under. Slate and Cedar was hers alone. The row house was mine before the marriage, but Monique advised patience and documentation instead of force. Camille had 30 days to find somewhere else to live or negotiate temporary occupancy terms. I changed the passwords on business accounts, removed my payment methods from the Slate and Cedar vendor portal, and notified the insurer that my company no longer sponsored any event business beyond existing written obligations. Clean cuts. No drama. Just locks turning. Camille swung through every version of herself that week. Angry first. "You planned this," she said when she saw the paperwork. "You wanted to humiliate me." Then injured. "You could not wait one day to talk like adults." Then seductive, which insulted me most because it assumed I was available for management. She came into the kitchen in one of my old college shirts and made coffee she did not drink. "Isaiah, we both know I said too much," she murmured. "Do not throw away years over one ugly dinner." I looked at her over the sink and said, "It was not one dinner. It was a pattern with a microphone." Yvette came by that Saturday with grocery bags and the kind of tired-faced women wear when they are related to beauty and ambition, and have spent years cleaning up after both. She stood on my porch while rain tapped the awning and said, "I am not here to defend her." We drank coffee at my kitchen table, the red recipe tin between us holding loose screws, and old takeout menus like always. Yvette told me what she knew. Donovan and Camille had been seen together for months at donor receptions, bars, and one weekend conference in D.C. I told her this would end badly. Yvette said, I believed her. Here is decision number 2. I could have forwarded every screenshot, every hotel receipt, every ugly text to Camille's mother, her friends, her nonprofit board, and Donovan's wife. Part of me wanted the blast radius. Part of me wanted witnesses to the specific ways I had been made a fool. But revenge that needs an audience starts resembling the thing that wounded you. So I did not post. I did not leak. I kept every document with my attorney and answered only what I was legally asked. That choice cost me the quick satisfaction of spectacle, but it kept my dignity intact. I would choose it again. The fallout still came, because truth has a way of walking into rooms uninvited once paperwork starts. During discovery, Monique's office requested bank and reimbursement records tied to marital spending and the Slate and Cedar lease. Camille delayed. Then she produced statements, so sloppy even I could see the gaps. Personal meals marked as client cultivation. Boutique hotel charges labeled venue scouting. Floral purchases with no corresponding events. My favorite lie was a $300 car service charge tag transportation for electrical supplies, as if I had ever in my life sent a sedan to pick up wire. Monique smiled the first time she saw that one. Useful, she said. Donovan vanished exactly the way cowards do. His number stopped reaching Camille. His social media went quiet. A mutual contact told Leon he had flown to Chicago for business. The week the first legal request landed. Translation: he was hiding behind airport lounges and his own wife's forgiveness. Camille pretended she did not care. Then I came home one afternoon and found her in our spare room, sitting on the floor among event linens and unopened candle boxes, crying so hard she could not catch breath. For 1 weak second, I felt protective. That old reflex again. Then I remembered whose mess I was standing in. Did he leave you? I asked. It was the only cruel question I ever let myself ask. Camille looked up, mascara gone, pride gone, all of it stripped down. He said this was getting complicated. She whispered. He said he cannot be dragged into a domestic dispute. I nodded slowly because that sounded exactly like a man who enjoyed being chosen, but had no intention of carrying weight. Camille looked around the room as if the walls might testify for her. I did not think you would move this fast, she said. I thought we would have time. Time for what? I asked. She had no answer. Slate and Cedar folded before the leaves changed. Once my insurance and company sponsorship were removed, 2 venues refused to host upcoming dinners without revised paperwork. One lender declined the business line Camille expected to use for deposits. Vendors wanted guarantees in writing. Donovan had promised introductions that never materialized. The whole venture had been built partly on my credit, my fixtures, my labor, and the reputation people had of me paying what I owed. Without those hidden supports, the elegant language around her brand collapsed into unpaid invoices and frantic emails. She called that sabotage. Monique called it the natural consequence of separation. The nonprofit audit was not something I started, but I did not soften it when they called. Their finance director left a voicemail asking why my company had been listed on 2 reimbursement forms as event infrastructure support when I had no invoices matching those dates. I called back and told the truth. I sent my actual invoices, clearly dated, clearly itemized. No commentary, no opinion, just records. 2 weeks later, Camille was placed on leave pending review. She came home with her jaw set hard and accused me of trying to destroy her career. You submitted false paperwork, I said. I corrected the record. She hated that sentence because it left nowhere to hide. Camille moved out in November to a furnished apartment in Owings Mills with thin walls and a bad parking lot. Yvette helped her carry boxes. Denise did not come. I watched from the porch because I wanted to be present without participating. The last thing Camille took was a framed black and white photo from our hallway, the one from our first anniversary at the harbor. She held it a second too long, then turned it face down in a box. I hope this house keeps you warm, she said, like the row house itself had chosen sides. It has, I answered. That made her mouth harden. Then she left. Divorce proceedings are not dramatic in the cinematic sense. They are slow, repetitive, and humiliating in administrative ways. You reduce the shape of a life to statements, appraisals, receipts, and the value of things you once touched with affection. A judge does not care about your private language or the songs you danced to while cleaning the kitchen. A judge cares about dissipation of assets, responsibility, ownership, and credibility. That turned out to matter in my favor. I had records. Camille had explanations. Records are boring, but they hold their line better under oath than people do under shame. The hearing took place on a gray Thursday with sleet ticking against the courthouse windows. I wore the same navy suit I use for funerals and licensing reviews. Camille wore forest green and looked beautiful in the brittle way glass looks beautiful right before it breaks. Donovan did not appear. Neither did Denise. Yvette sat in the back alone, hands folded, face unreadable. Monique walked me through my documents with steady precision. Mortgage payments, lease guarantees, joint funds redirected to personal travel, reimbursements that did not match reality. She did not need to perform outrage. She let the math do the talking. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. Camille's attorney tried to paint me as controlling because I handled household bills. I almost admired the attempt. It was thin, but it was intelligent. He suggested I benefited from making myself indispensable. He said Camille felt financially pressured by my expectations. Monique asked 3 questions that took the air out of that balloon. Did Camille have her own income? Yes. Did she have access to marital accounts? Yes. Did she conceal spending on travel and gifts unrelated to the marriage? Long pause, then yes, though wrapped in words like networking and blurred boundaries. Judges hear tone as much as testimony. I watched the court's patience shrink. When the ruling came, it was not flashy. No one gasped. No one stood up. The judge simply found that Camille had used marital funds for non-marital purposes, failed to meet agreed financial obligations tied to the household and Slate and Cedar, and misrepresented certain expenses. I was awarded reimbursement, release from remaining event business liability, and a larger share of the liquid assets left after the mess was sorted. Not everything. Real life is never that clean. But enough. Enough to restore the damage. Enough to say the truth had weight. Camille stared straight ahead as a stillness could save face. The weeks after were quieter than I expected. People imagine victory feels electric. Mine felt like finally turning off a buzzing light that had lived behind my forehead for a year. I grieved more after the ruling than before it. That surprised me. I would come home from work, set my keys in the bowl by the door, and stand in the kitchen staring at 2 mugs when I only needed one. I missed the version of Camille who handed me a plate in a church kitchen by flashlight. I missed the marriage I thought I had. Missing what was false is still real pain. Work saved me in ordinary ways. I trained a new apprentice named Micah who talked too much and stripped wire too short until I taught him patience. I reopened the Saturday class at New Hope and brought in old switches, breakers, and lamp parts so the boys could learn with their hands. Leon kept my chair open at the shop even when I did not need a cut, just company. He would drape the cape over me, lower his voice, and say, "Talk or do not talk. Either way, sit still." There's a kind of love between black men that looks like routine. I needed that more than advice. Winter settled over Baltimore hard that year. Radiators hissed in the row house like impatient elders. The corner store sold out of rock salt every time the forecast whispered snow. I spent long evenings in the workshop refinishing the brass fixtures I had built for slate and cedar, sanding off wax drips and fingerprints, giving them a second life as pendant lights for my own dining room. That mattered to me, not because I needed symbolism, but because I was tired of seeing my labor framed inside her dream. Some things you reclaim with speeches. Some things you reclaim with a screwdriver and enough quiet to hear yourself think. Camille called twice in January about the payment schedule ordered in the settlement, once in February about forwarding mail, and once in March for no practical reason at all. I knew that call from the silence before she spoke. "How are you?" she asked. Not out of care, out of hunger. I told her I was fine. She said she was looking for work. She said people had become judgmental. I nearly said, people became informed. Instead, I said, "I hope you find something stable." She cried softly and said, "You always sound so calm." What she meant was, "You no longer sound reachable." She came by in person in April, early evening, while I was on the porch replacing a light fixture, and the sky was the color of wet cement. She looked thinner, less polished, not ruined exactly, just returned to the size of an ordinary person after years of moving like a headline. She stood at the bottom of the steps in a plain coat and said, "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I kept my screwdriver in my hand. "I know," I said. She swallowed hard. I thought I wanted a bigger life. I did not understand I was standing in one. She asked if we could talk inside. I said no. Boundaries are easier to keep if you do not dress them up as cruelty. So we talked on the porch while a train moaned far off, and somebody nearby burned garlic in a pan. Camille told me Donovan had gone back to his wife publicly and privately blamed her for everything. She told me the nonprofit had let her resign before formal termination, but nobody downtown would touch her resume now. She said she had been staying with a cousin, then alone. She said humiliation had changed the flavor of every room she entered. Then she said the thing I had half expected and still hated hearing. "I know I did not deserve it," she said, "but is there any way we could start over?" She was crying by then, shoulders rounded, voice stripped down to the woman from the church kitchen and the carryout, and the early days when I thought honesty lived in her naturally. That made it harder, not easier. I looked at the porch light I had just wired and thought about scorched copper inside old walls. When a wire burns, you cannot keep the pretty switch plate and pretend the heat never happened. You pull it out. You start clean. "No," I said, and I said it gently because cruelty had already done enough work in our marriage. We cannot start over. There is no over there to start from. Camille covered her mouth with both hands, a child's gesture on a grown woman. "Isaiah, I know I said terrible things." "You did," I answered, "but the public words are not even the hardest part. The hardest part is that you build a private life with me while auditioning another one in secret. I can forgive that in the sense that I do not want revenge anymore. I cannot live inside it again." She looked at the windows of the row house, at the workshop door, at the truck, at the little square of basil I was trying to grow in a planter that had seen better summers. I think she finally understood then what she had mistaken all along. She had called my life small because it was not shiny. She had called it limited because it required showing up instead of performing. "You were never beneath me," she whispered, not really to me, more to the air between us. "No," I said, "I was just not useful to your fantasy anymore." That landed. She nodded once, slow and ashamed. She left without asking again. She walked down the steps, across the path, and out to the sidewalk where evening traffic washed past in red and white lines. I watched her go because some endings deserve witness, even when they no longer deserve participation. Then I went back to the porch light and tightened the last screw. That was the shape of my revenge, if you want to call it that. I stopped rescuing the lie. I told the truth on paper. I let the hidden supports disappear. Everything else that fell had been leaning on me without my consent. If you made it to the end of this first-person relationship drama, and you want more cheating spouse stories, revenge narratives, and emotional stories with real consequences, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Send this to someone who loves powerful drama, and let me know which moment hit hardest: the dinner table betrayal, the courtroom fallout, or the porch goodbye. The part that stayed with me in this story is not the restaurant line. It is the paperwork, the porch, and the brass fixtures Isaiah reclaimed with his own hands. Public disrespect is usually the last symptom, not the first. When trust burns all the way inside the wall, calm is not weakness. Calm is how you keep your future from catching fire with the rest of it. The end.